Hey everyone, I want to give you a quick analysis in terms of where do I think home prices are going to go over the next couple of years. The short answer is I don't know and no one knows, right? But I want to paint a picture to give you a path of what I think might happen given the data that I have now. Just like I've done before, I'm going to show you my analysis. I'm going to show you where I got the data, where you can get the data all for free for you to do your own analysis. And if you disagree with where I'm going, just go ahead and tell me, comment or DM me, post your own video, but again, do it with supporting data. So basically what I'm gonna try to do is analyze where do we have to go in terms of year-over-year home price increases over the next few years to come back to the long-term trend. What we've seen over the last, call it, maybe 18 months or so, we've seen home prices increase at 15, 16, 20% year over year. That is unlikely to continue going forward indefinitely, right? We're just way above trend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what is a long-term average, the long-term trend for home prices increase year over year. And then I'm going to paint a picture of what needs to happen over the next few years for us to get back to that trend. So that's all I'm going to do. And then again, if you want access to my data, just DM me. But first, follow me on Instagram, Money Luis G. That's Money Luis G. DM me, and I can send you my information. I can also give you my data set for you to just take it and do what you want with it, do your own analysis, or just go get it for free. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to share with you my spreadsheet. And the first thing you're going to see here, I got the data set just like before my other videos. I like Fred. It's from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. It's obviously a legitimate data source. You can go get it. And more importantly, it's free. So you can get it exactly the same data set that I got. And they have tons and tons of other information about real estate, the stock market, economic data, a lot of great stuff from this source. So this is the median sale price of houses sold in the United States going back to 1963 until now. Now, Fred got their information from HUD. And what I did is I downloaded it, and here's what you see. Here's the raw data, and what you're seeing in column A is quarterly information going back from 1963 until 2022. And what you see here, for example, so column A12, 1963 on 1/1, the median home price in the US was 17,800, right? Pretty affordable given where we are today. And what you see here is every quarter. So it goes one quarter, it's the 1st of April, 1963, 18,000 and on and on. So what I did here on the column C, I simply, and here's my formula, I compare year over year changes. So you see blue over red. Blue is January of 1964. Red is January of 1963. That's 12 months. And I found out what is the growth, 18,500 divided by 17,800. And you see that the increase was 3.93%. I did this year over year and so forth, all the way down. You can see the dates, the prices, as home prices increased. And we're going to fast forward to where we are today. The latest data set that I have available is April of 2022. The median home sale in the US, the price was $440,300. Year over year increase of 15.08%. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the whole data set since 1963. The average increase in home prices year over year was 5.72%. Then I looked at a couple of different data sets. 30 years, it was an increase of 4.47%. 10 years, 6.54%. And then what I did here is during the COVID era, and the reason I isolated that is, as everyone knows, COVID threw us for a loop. It just completely disrupted not only the housing market, but also the stock market and everything else that comes with it, supply issues, just a lot of issues that we're still working to get out of. And so the average increase during that period was 17.19%, way above the trend, right? And I'm going to focus, my baseline is going to be looking at 1963 until 2022. So I'm going to focus on comparing 5.72% versus 17.9%. And I think even if you're not into numbers, if you don't like data, intuitively, you know that if we've grown at 5.72% over a long period of time, and we're growing at 17% now, it's more likely than not that we're going to come back to trend. That's called reversion to the mean. So you don't have to know statistics to know that if you're way above where you normally are, more likely than not, you're going to come back down. Same thing, if you're way below the average, more likely than not, you're going to move back up to the average. Again, called reversion to the mean. So I'm going to focus again on 5.72%. And so I'm going to show you a couple of things here. We're going to focus on what I'm highlighting now. And what I'm showing you here is at the start of the year, where were home prices, right? So in 2020, 329,000, start of 2021, 369,800, and you get the idea. The latest data set, like I said, 440,300, that was April of 2022. And what I'm gonna do is compare and say, what if COVID never happened, right? Remember, COVID threw us for a loop. What if it never happened and we were continuing to grow at the long-term trend? So I'm gonna start 2020, the start of the year, right before COVID. COVID actually started happening and disrupted us towards the end of Q1 2020. So starting 2020 is a good starting point. 329,000, right? That was the actual price at the start of the year. And what I said there is, if COVID never happened, well, we would have increased year over year. If I'm using the averages at 5.72%, right? I showed you where I got that from. So at the start of 2021, we should have been at 347,800. Then I increased it again by 5.72%. At the start of 2022, we should have been at 367,000. And then on the 1st of April, we should have been at 372,000. However, we were at 440,000. So we were $67,348 above the long-term trend. To get back to the trend, home prices would have to decrease by 15.3%, right, to get back to the trend. And I show you here some other alternatives looking at the 30-year. If you're looking at the 30-year trend, it would have to decrease by 17.54%. If you wanted to use a 10-year trend, 13.79%. So again, I'm giving you some alternatives to kind of get you to think. If you disagree with me, go ahead and pick your data set. I think going back to 1963 until now, it's broad enough for me to feel comfortable and confident that that 5.72% annual increase is a good baseline to start with, right? So that means you would have to decrease by 15.3% from where we are today. Now, we don't live in a vacuum, so I'm not saying that we're going to drop that quickly, but what I want to do is, if we went out a few years from where we are today, what type of scenario would have to play out for us to get back to trend, right? So all I'm doing is that we know we're above trend, right? We're growing at 17%, and I need to get us back to about 5.72%, the long-term trend. So what needs to happen? So let me show you what I did here. Looking at the long-term trend, right? These are the numbers that we saw previously. So 329,000, that's the number you see here. And then 22, 21, 348, same number. 367, 698, same number here. What I'm doing now is saying in 2020, at the beginning of 2023, if we're growing at the same long-term trend of 5.72%, which I'm highlighting, at the start of 2023, we should be at 388,720, right? The median home price. Now, if we continue the start of 2024 at that same long-term trend of 5.72%, we should be at 410,900. And then by 2025, you grow that by 5.72% again, you're at 434,000, right? And so what I'm going to do is compare that, and this is the long-term trend, right? And so what I'm going to do is, how do we get to the long-term trend by 2025? And so now what we're going to do is go to the actual here, right? And I'm going to create a path. 329,000, as I said, that's the actual data print at the start of 2020. 2021, right? It's the actual 2021, and 2022 is the actual amount. And so what I'm doing now, you see these growth rates, I say, look, if we actually decrease 5% on an annual basis going into 2023, so from right now to the end of the year, we drop 5% on the national level. That means the median home price would drop to 411,445. What if we then grew to 2% in 2024? We would be at 419,600. And what if we grew in 2025, or at least get to the start of 2025 at 3.5%, then we'd be at 434,000. Now, this 434,000 that you see here that I'm pointing to is the same thing now as a long-term trend of 434,440. It's not exact, but it's very, very close. All that means if COVID did not happen and we continue to grow at that 5.72% year over year increase in homes, by the start of 2025, we should be at 434,000. Now here's where we are, real data, but if we were to drop 5% and then grow at 2%, then at 3.5, that gets us to the long-term trend. So all I did is taking us from that 17% increase year over year, which is unlikely to continue longer term, brought us back down. How did it bring us down? By creating a scenario here. So I'm going to highlight three cells and pay attention to here the average. The average is 0.17%. So what I'm saying is over the next 3 years, if we were to grow at an average of 0.17% year over year for the 3 years, we would get back to trend. So we have to grow very, very little to take us from 17 all the way back down to 5.72%. Now, why do I think that's more likely than dropping right away, right? Because someone can argue, well, yeah, we're not going to wait until 2025. We're actually going to drop now. Well, if you said if we drop today, what it has to drop to get back to trend, we do have to drop 15.3%. But I don't think we're likely to drop right away. The real estate market is not like the stock market. The stock market corrects very, very quickly. The real estate market does not correct that quickly. Plus, we don't live in a vacuum, right? You have to consider other things that are happening. I made a case, right? If you think of real estate, right? You look at the demand and the supply. On the demand side, that's driven a lot by interest rates. On a previous video, I made a case of why I think interest rates, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, has actually peaked and more likely than not is going to come down, not move up. I make a case looking at inflation, giving you some data why I think it's actually going to come down and not up, right? And so that I think that's just going to keep some demand going, right? Buyers in here. So if you have buyers, hopefully that means that home prices aren't going to come down that much, because if they do come down a little bit, you're going to get some buyers. Those millennials have been waiting quite a bit on the sideline because they can't afford it, will become a little bit more affordable if rates come down a little bit, right? Secondly, there's a big dislocation in the supply of homes, right? So there's a guy by the name of Mark Zandi. So he's from Moody's Analytics. He's quoted a lot, gives a lot of information on the housing market. According to his analysis, and it's one of the more conservatives, there's a housing shortage. Right now, there's about 1.6 million houses that we're short, right? We need to build that many houses to keep up with the demand. So what that means is that the supply is going to continue to be tight. Plus, right, everyone knows of the dislocation we're seeing now, where really we don't have a lot of housing inventory. We're getting back to normal, but we're still at a depressed level. So that's why I think home prices are not going to correct like this. They will correct eventually. And I think if they went down 5% and then grew at 2% and 3.5%, I think that's a reasonable case going forward because of what I said. Interest rates, I think, have plateaued, more likely than not will come down, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And there's that dislocation in the supply of homes. And we just saw a data point that came out earlier this week where home builders are not very confident anymore. That means they're not building as much. And so if they're not building that much, that's going to create a bigger issue with the inventory in home supplies. So that's why I think more likely than not, we're not going to see this big drop right away. Now, this is on the national level. I want to show you something here real quickly, just so you get an idea, right? Here's Nevada. So you look at Nevada, what it's been growing. I'm hovering over, again, this is Fred, you can go look at it. The latest print we have is that it was growing at about 28% year over year. You start seeing that it's coming down a little bit, right? It's coming down a little bit, so we have to pay attention to that. There are going to be areas that are going to take a bigger hit than what I painted, that 5%. Just look at what happened in Las Vegas, right? During this big decrease, that whole issue we went into, Vegas dropped about, there's call it 30+%. Look, 32%. So as I hover, you could see how much it dropped. It took a big hit because it went up so high. Right before it dropped, it was going at 50%. There's a print, 50% year-over-year increase in 2004. That's crazy because it went up so high, it dropped so much. Same thing looking at Arizona, looking at Phoenix, right? It's dropped a lot. It dropped 35% or so during that big decrease. And you can see now Phoenix is actually starting to come down, right? So I'm paying attention to this. That's why I think 5% might make sense on the national level, but there are areas like Phoenix that are going to get hit a lot more than that. And so you could see it was growing before in the 30s, right? And now it's growing at 29%. So what you first see is a deceleration, and then you start seeing home prices actually go down. Looking at Los Angeles, right, during the Great Recession, kind of what happened here where it peaked, it went all the way down to the worst, about, call it 28% year-over-year decrease during that big fiasco. Miami, look at Miami, was down almost 30% here, 29%, 28% during that era. Again, you can get this data yourself. You could see Miami, where it's growing now, 33, almost 34% that it's been growing, the latest print. So that continues to go up, but there are markets now, right? Phoenix is one of the markets that has led us up, meaning it's had one of the highest year-over-year increases. You see it's plateaued and it's starting to go down. This is why it's so important. If you look, this is at the national level, you start seeing here that homes start decelerating, right? So on the national level, we were growing at 13, 14%, and then it started to come down 13%, 12%, 11%. Before it went to negative, right? So right now we're seeing some areas starting to increase. As soon as we start seeing a deceleration like Phoenix, and the reason I pay attention to Phoenix is that they've led us up. Usually what leads us up is going to lead us back down. And so you're starting to see that cool off quite a bit on the national level. A lot of areas you're seeing that cool down quite a bit. And so that's what I'm paying attention to, right? So a little cautious on the real estate market. Again, I don't think it's going to be as bad as what we saw during the Great Recession, but there will be a cool down, right? It's just going to happen. There's a lot of data that comes in. As new data comes in, I will keep you up to date. And so that's what I wanted to give you. I want to show you my data, kind of give you my thesis, walk you through a story of what I think is likely to happen in the real estate market on the national level. Again, real estate is very different because it's localized. Some areas will take a much bigger hit than what I just painted. If you guys want, I can do an analysis in a city. Just punch in, comment what city you want me to do. I can do something similar and kind of walk you through what would have to happen for us to get back to the long-term trend, so you get an idea of what homes have to decrease to get to that long-term area. So again, that's what I wanted to show you. Let me know what you think of this video. Comment on any other video you want me to do. And like I said, follow me on Instagram, MoneyLuisG. DM me and I can give you this data for free, or you can go get it at Fred. Until next time.